Imagine an empire so powerful that it dared to challenge the pharaohs of Egypt in one of the greatest battles of antiquity. A kingdom that dominated Anatolia, revolutionized warfare and diplomacy, and yet was erased from history for centuries. Who were the Hittites? Why was this empire forgotten? In the heart of what is now modern Turkey, amidst mountains and plateaus, emerged one of the first great empires of the Bronze Age. The Hittites didn't just create one of the earliest legal codes, they were masters in the art of war and negotiation. Today, we'll reveal how these remarkable people changed the course of history. The year is 1300 before Christ. While Egyptian monuments stood tall along the Nile and Babylonian merchants traded across Mesopotamia, another power was quietly shaping the ancient world from their capital, Hattusa. The Hittite Empire, a civilization so advanced that they were among the first to master ironworking, yet so thoroughly forgotten that historians only rediscovered their existence in the 19th century. Their story is one of military innovation, political intrigue, and cultural sophistication. They developed lightweight war chariots that transformed battlefield tactics. Their kings crafted diplomatic treaties so advanced they became models for international relations for centuries to follow. And when they faced Ramses II at the Battle of Kadesh, they forced the mighty Egypt into history's first recorded peace treaty. How did such a powerful civilization vanish from our collective memory? What secrets did they take to their graves? And what can their rise and mysterious fall teach us about the fragility of even the mightiest empires? If you love history and want to discover the secrets of the ancient world's greatest empires, stay right there. Like this video, subscribe to Legacy of Empires, and join us on this incredible journey through antiquity. Our story begins in the 17th century before Christ, in a rugged landscape of central Anatolia, where the city of Hattusa stands perched dramatically atop steep, rocky cliffs. Imagine this place, a natural fortress surrounded by harsh terrain, with massive stone walls reinforced by towers that seem to touch the sky. This wasn't just any settlement, this was the heart of what would become one of antiquity's most formidable powers. The people who built Hattusa weren't originally called Hittites. That name would come much later from biblical references. They called themselves the people of Hatti, adopting the name from the local inhabitants they had conquered. These newcomers were part of a migration of Indo-European peoples, bringing with them a language and culture that would transform the region. The true birth of the Hittite Empire came with the rise of a remarkable leader, Hattusili I. Taking the throne around 1650 before Christ, this ambitious king had a vision that extended far beyond the rocky highlands of central Anatolia. In an age when most rulers were content to control just their immediate surroundings, Hattusili sought to create something greater. What made Hattusili extraordinary wasn't just his military campaigns, though he led many, extending Hittite control across central Anatolia and pushing toward northern Syria. It was his foresight in creating the foundations of a true empire. He established administrative systems, built diplomatic relationships, and began the process of transforming the Hittites from a regional power into an international force. One fascinating detail about Hattusili's reign is that he actually moved his capital to Hattusa after it had been destroyed. Legend says he rebuilt it from ashes, seeing strategic value in its position that others had missed. This decision would prove pivotal, as Hattusa would remain the Hittite capital for the next 4 centuries. But the true genius of the Hittites, what really set them apart from their contemporaries, was their remarkable military innovation. While other kingdoms were still fighting in traditional ways, the Hittites were revolutionizing warfare. Did you know that the Hittites were among the first peoples to use iron weapons on a large scale? While neighboring empires still relied on bronze for their armaments, Hittite smiths were forging stronger, more durable iron swords. This wasn't just a slight improvement, it was a complete military revolution. Imagine facing an army whose weapons could cut through your best defenses. The psychological impact alone must have been devastating. Even more impressive was their refinement of the war chariot. Previous chariots were heavy, cumbersome vehicles that required 3 men to operate effectively. The Hittites redesigned them to be lighter and more maneuverable, requiring only 2 men, a driver and a warrior. These chariots could now move with unprecedented speed across battlefields, allowing for rapid strikes and tactical flexibility that their enemies simply couldn't match. What's particularly striking about these innovations is how the Hittites managed to keep some of their metallurgical techniques secret. Historical records suggest they carefully controlled knowledge of ironworking, treating it as a state secret and strategic advantage. This early form of technological protectionism helped maintain their military edge for generations. The foundations laid during this early period, from Hattusa's establishment to the military innovations that followed, created the springboard from which the Hittite Empire would launch itself into the ranks of the ancient world superpowers, forever changing the balance of power across the Near East. The year is 1274 before Christ. 2 mighty empires stand at the peak of their power, with armies gathered on the plains near a small Syrian city called Kadesh. On one side, the splendor of Egypt under the command of the young and ambitious Pharaoh Ramses II. On the other, the formidable Hittite forces led by the cunning king Muwatalli II. What was about to unfold would become one of the largest and most well-documented battles of the ancient world. Imagine this scene: thousands of Egyptian soldiers marching northward through the Syrian landscape, their standards bearing the symbols of Amun-Ra billowing in the wind. The young Pharaoh Ramses, barely 30 years old, leading his forces with absolute confidence. His goal: to reclaim the disputed territories of Syria and Canaan and demonstrate Egyptian dominance over the Near East once and for all. But the Hittites were ready. King Muwatalli had assembled a massive coalition army with soldiers from across his empire and allies from as far away as Mesopotamia. While Egyptian records claim they faced an army of 17,000 infantry and 3,500 chariots, modern historians believe these numbers might actually have been even larger. What makes this battle truly fascinating was the brilliant strategy employed by the Hittites. While Ramses divided his forces into 4 divisions, advancing separately toward Kadesh, Hittite scouts captured 2 Bedouin spies. Under interrogation, these spies revealed crucial misinformation, claiming the Hittite army was still far away, cowering in fear of the mighty Egyptian force. Ramses took the bait completely. Advancing with just his vanguard division of Amun, he rushed ahead to set up camp near Kadesh, leaving his other divisions strung out for miles behind him. Little did the pharaoh know that the entire Hittite army was hiding just beyond a small hill east of the city, poised like a cobra ready to strike. Then came the masterstroke of Hittite military genius. A small group of supposed deserters approached the Egyptian camp with a new piece of deliberate misinformation: that the Hittite army was now retreating in fear. While Ramses was processing this news, the Hittites unleashed their devastating attack. 2,500 chariots, lighter, faster, and more maneuverable than their Egyptian counterparts, swept across the Orontes River and crashed into the unprepared Egyptian division of Re, which was still marching toward the camp. The Hittite chariots tore through the Egyptian lines like a scythe through wheat. Survivors fled in panic toward Ramses' camp, with Hittite chariots in hot pursuit. Within moments, the camp itself was under attack from all sides. Egyptian accounts claim that Ramses personally led a counterattack, fighting with the courage of a lion, though this is likely royal propaganda rather than historical fact. What we do know is that disaster was only averted for Egypt by the timely arrival of a contingent of troops known as the Ne'arin, possibly Canaanite mercenaries who arrived unexpectedly from the coast. This fresh force helped stabilize the Egyptian position until the remaining divisions could arrive. By day's end, both sides had suffered heavy losses. The battle ended in a tactical stalemate. The Egyptians had survived what could have been a devastating defeat, while the Hittites remained in control of Kadesh and the surrounding territory. But perhaps the most remarkable part of this story came in its aftermath. For 16 years following the battle, Egypt and the Hittite Empire remained in a state of hostility. Then, facing new threats from Assyria and dealing with internal pressures, the Hittite king Hattusili III, who had since taken the throne, reached out to Ramses with an unprecedented proposal, a formal peace treaty. In the 21st year of Ramses' reign, around 1258 before Christ, the two powers signed what historians consider the first detailed peace treaty in human history. The agreement was inscribed on silver tablets, with copies preserved on clay tablets in both Egyptian hieroglyphics and Hittite cuneiform. Remarkably, we can still read this treaty today, as copies were discovered both in Egypt's Karnak temple and in the Hittite capital of Hattusa. The treaty not only ended hostilities, but established mutual defense agreements, extradition processes for fugitives, and even included provisions for the royal families to intermarry. In fact, Ramses would eventually marry not one, but two Hittite princesses to seal this alliance. This diplomatic breakthrough changed the course of ancient history, creating a balance of power that would help stabilize the region for generations. A battle that began with deception and bloodshed ultimately led to one of humanity's first great diplomatic achievements. So what do you think about the power of the Hittites now? If you're enjoying this journey through ancient history, leave a like and comment below. Which ancient empire would you like to see featured in our next video? Beyond their military might and diplomatic achievements, the Hittites created a remarkably sophisticated society that was centuries ahead of its time. While their neighbors ruled through fear and harsh punishment, the Hittites developed legal and social systems that still feel surprisingly modern to us today. Imagine living in a time when most civilizations imposed brutal penalties like mutilation or death for even minor offenses. Now picture the contrast of Hittite law, where justice took a dramatically different approach. The Hittite legal code, dating back to the 16th century before Christ, stands as one of humanity's earliest attempts at creating a fair and measured system of justice. What made their laws truly revolutionary wasn't just their existence, but their philosophy. Unlike their contemporaries in Mesopotamia, who followed the harsh principle of an eye for an eye, Hittite law focused primarily on compensation and rehabilitation rather than revenge. For instance, if someone stole cattle rather than losing a hand, they would pay restitution and additional damages to make the victim whole again. Even more surprising was the status of women in Hittite society. While women across most of the ancient world had few rights and were treated as property, Hittite women could own land, conduct business, inherit property, and even initiate divorce. Queen Puduhepa, wife of King Hattusili III, wasn't just a ceremonial figure. She was a powerful diplomat who co-signed treaties, corresponded directly with foreign rulers, and wielded genuine political authority. One fascinating tablet discovered by archaeologists records a divorce agreement where both husband and wife received equal shares of property. Imagine that, equal division of assets in a divorce settlement over 3,000 years ago. The Hittites were remarkably progressive in other ways too. Their legal code placed strong emphasis on individual intent. If harm was caused accidentally rather than deliberately, punishment was significantly reduced. This concept of considering someone's intentions when judging their actions was rare in the ancient world and showcases the Hittites' legal sophistication. Religion permeated every aspect of Hittite life, with a rich and complex pantheon that reflected their multicultural empire. The Hittites were unique in their willingness to adopt and incorporate deities from conquered peoples, creating what some scholars call the 1,000 gods of Hatti. At the head of this divine assembly stood the weather god Tarhunna, imagined as a mighty figure wielding thunder and lightning. Equally important was the sun goddess of Arinna, protector of the royal family and kingdom. Together, these deities formed the supreme divine couple in Hittite worship. What's particularly intriguing about Hittite religion was their approach to divine anger. When disaster struck, be it plague, drought, or military defeat, the Hittites believed it was because their gods were displeased. To restore divine favor, they performed elaborate rituals, some of which have been preserved in remarkable detail on clay tablets. One such ritual, meant to purify the army after defeat, involved soldiers marching between the severed parts of a sacrificed dog, sheep, and pig, symbolically transferring impurity to the animals. Other tablets describe rituals so secret that parts of the text simply state, "spoken words that cannot be written down." The king himself served as the empire's high priest, responsible for maintaining proper relations with the divine world. During important festivals like the spring celebration called Puruli, the king would journey to sacred sites, making offerings and performing rituals that would ensure the gods' continued blessing on the land. All of this knowledge comes to us through one of the most remarkable archaeological discoveries of the 20th century. For centuries, the Hittites were merely a mysterious people briefly mentioned in the Bible. Then, in 1906, German archaeologist Hugo Winkler began excavations at a site called Boğazköy in central Turkey. What he uncovered was Hattusa, the long-lost Hittite capital. Even more incredibly, he found a vast library of over 30,000 clay tablets and fragments, preserved for millennia in the ruins of the royal archives. These tablets, written in cuneiform, those wedge-shaped marks pressed into clay, revealed the inner workings of the Hittite Empire. Some contained diplomatic correspondence with Egypt and Babylon, others preserved religious hymns, ritual instructions, and historical chronicles. Many recorded the day-to-day administration of the empire, from tax records to inventories. The Hittite scribes who created these tablets were meticulous record keepers, documenting everything from major treaties to weather omens. They even created what we might call the world's first diplomatic database, cataloging past agreements so they could reference precedents when negotiating new ones. When archaeologists translate these tablets, they give us an intimate window into a lost world. We can read the actual words of Hittite kings, priests, and officials, their hopes, fears, prayers, and proclamations, bridging a gap of over 3,000 years. Through their laws that valued justice over vengeance, their complex religious practices, and their detailed written records, the Hittites created a sophisticated civilization that in many ways was far ahead of its time. Though their cities may lie in ruins, the tablets they left behind ensure that their voice continues to speak to us across the millennia. Around 1200 before Christ, something catastrophic happened across the eastern Mediterranean. One by one, great Bronze Age civilizations began to crumble. Cities that had stood for centuries were reduced to ash. Trade networks that had connected distant lands fell silent. And at the heart of this tumultuous period, the mighty Hittite Empire, which had dominated Anatolia for 500 years, simply vanished. What could possibly bring down such a powerful civilization? The collapse of the Hittite Empire remains one of ancient history's greatest mysteries, a puzzle that continues to captivate archaeologists and historians to this day. The most dramatic evidence of this collapse can be seen at Hattusa itself. Imagine walking through this once magnificent capital city shortly after its fall. The massive gates that had protected the city for centuries, now scorched by intense fire. The grand temples, ransacked and abandoned, the royal palace, reduced to charred rubble. Archaeological evidence tells us that Hattusa didn't slowly decline. It ended violently and suddenly. Even more telling is what the excavators didn't find. No mass graves, no bodies in the streets, no last stand by desperate defenders. Instead, it appears the city was methodically evacuated before its destruction. The most valuable treasures, religious objects, and royal regalia were carefully removed. The Hittite royal family and administrative elite had fled, taking with them the symbols of their authority. But what exactly drove them away? This is where the mystery deepens, and several fascinating theories have emerged. The most dramatic explanation involves mysterious groups known as the Sea Peoples. Egyptian records tell us of massive migrations of different tribal groups who swept through the eastern Mediterranean like a tidal wave around this time. These seafaring raiders attacked Egypt, destroyed cities along the Levantine coast, and potentially pushed inland toward Hittite territories. Some scholars believe these sea peoples, whoever they were, delivered the final blow to an already weakened Hittite state. What makes the Sea Peoples particularly intriguing is that we still don't know exactly who they were. Egyptian reliefs show them as warriors with distinctive feathered headdresses and unusual weapons, sometimes accompanied by ox carts carrying their families. Were they displaced refugees themselves, pirates seeking plunder, or organized invasion forces? Their true identity remains one of archaeology's greatest unsolved mysteries. But external invasion is just one possibility. Another compelling theory points to environmental catastrophe. Recent studies of ancient climate data reveal evidence of a severe and prolonged drought that struck the eastern Mediterranean around the time the Hittite Empire collapsed. Tree ring samples, pollen analysis, and lake sediment cores all tell the same story: a sudden shift to much drier conditions that lasted for decades. For an empire dependent on agricultural surplus, such a drought would have been devastating. Imagine year after year of failed harvests, empty granaries, and growing hunger. Ancient texts from neighboring regions describe desperate people selling their children for grain and resorting to eating wild plants to survive. A letter found at the Syrian site of Ugarit, which also fell during this period, paints a vivid picture. There is famine in our house. We will all die of hunger. If you do not quickly arrive here, we ourselves will die of hunger. You will not see a living soul from your land. The desperation in these ancient words is palpable across the millennia. Then there's a third possibility: internal political collapse. In its final decades, the Hittite Empire faced increasing instability. Royal succession disputes, provincial rebellions, and the rising power of vassal kings all strained the central authority. One fascinating clay tablet records a Hittite king lamenting that a trusted ally has rejected his lordship and taken away the land of Hatti, suggesting serious internal fractures within the empire. The truth likely involves a perfect storm of all these factors combined. External attacks from the Sea Peoples and other enemies, devastating drought and famine, and internal political breakdown, each crisis making the others worse, until the entire system collapsed. Whatever the exact cause, the consequences were profound. Within just a generation or two, the Hittite Empire had completely disappeared from history. The grand capital of Hattusa, once home to thousands, became an abandoned ruin. The sophisticated administrative system that had governed an empire ceased to function. The cuneiform writing that had recorded centuries of Hittite history was no longer taught or understood. For the next 3,000 years, the Hittites were forgotten. Their cities lay buried under layers of earth, their achievements unknown, their language unread. Only a few vague references in the Bible and Egyptian texts hinted that such a people had ever existed. It would take until the late 19th and early 20th century for archaeologists to rediscover this lost civilization and realize its importance. Yet while the empire itself disappeared, its legacy lived on in surprising ways. To the east, the Assyrians, who would later dominate the region, adopted many Hittite military innovations, from iron weapons to chariot tactics. The Neo-Hittite city-states that emerged in northern Syria and southeastern Anatolia preserved elements of Hittite art, architecture, and religious practices for centuries. perhaps most enduring, was the Hittite expertise in ironworking. As their empire collapsed, Hittite craftsmen likely fled to other regions, taking their precious knowledge with them. Some scholars believe this diaspora of skilled metalworkers helped spread iron technology throughout the Mediterranean and Near East, accelerating the transition from the Bronze Age to the Iron Age. The story of the Hittites offers us a sobering reminder about the fragility of even the most powerful civilizations. An empire that had stood for 5 centuries, that had fought Egypt to a standstill, that had created sophisticated laws and diplomatic systems, wiped away in less than a generation. As we look at our own complex global civilization today, with its interconnected systems and environmental challenges, the mysterious collapse of the Hittites seems not just like ancient history, but a cautionary tale worth considering. What vulnerabilities exist in our own society? What combinations of crises might we face? And will future archaeologists someday puzzle over our own collapsed cities, wondering what went wrong? The Hittites may have vanished into the mists of time for nearly 3 millennia, but their remarkable legacy endures to this day. When German archaeologist Hugo Winkler first uncovered the ruins of Hattusa in 1906, he didn't just discover a forgotten city. He reopened a lost chapter of human history that continues to reshape our understanding of the ancient world. Consider this: a civilization so completely erased from memory that even the great historians of Greece and Rome barely mentioned them, now revealed as one of the most influential powers of the Bronze Age. The Hittites remind us that history is full of gaps and surprises, with entire empires waiting to be rediscovered beneath our feet. What's particularly fascinating is how much we're still learning about the Hittites today. Just recently, in 2021, archaeologists uncovered a new temple complex at Hattusa that had remained hidden for over 3,000 years. Inside, they found ritual objects and tablets that provide fresh insights into Hittite religious practices. Each new discovery adds another piece to this ancient puzzle. And what about the thousands of clay tablets still awaiting translation? Some estimate that less than half of the recovered Hittite texts have been fully translated and published. What secrets might they hold? Lost technologies, forgotten historical events, insights into their culture that would surprise us even further. There are also tantalizing questions about the fate of the Hittite royal family and elite after they abandoned Hattusa. Where did they go? Did they establish new communities elsewhere? Some scholars believe they may have fled to the southeastern regions of their former empire, perhaps even founding some of the Neo-Hittite states that emerged in the early Iron Age. The story of the Hittites offers us a profound lesson about historical memory and resilience. Even the mightiest empires can be forgotten, their cities reduced to dust, and their achievements overlooked. Yet somehow, across the vast expanse of time, fragments of their legacy survived in the iron tools they pioneered, in the diplomatic practices they established, in the clay tablets they left behind. They remind us that what truly endures isn't always stone monuments or golden treasures, but ideas, innovations, and cultural breakthroughs that ripple forward through the centuries, influencing civilizations that may never even know their source. As we stand in the 21st century, looking back across nearly 4,000 years to the time when Hittite chariots thundered across Anatolian plains and their kings exchanged letters with Egyptian pharaohs, we are left to wonder: what aspects of our own civilization will survive the test of time? Which of our achievements will be remembered or forgotten by distant future generations? I hope this journey through the rise and fall of the Hittite Empire has sparked your curiosity about this fascinating civilization and the broader tapestry of ancient history. There are so many more lost empires and forgotten stories waiting to be explored. Do you think there are still Hittite secrets waiting to be discovered? Perhaps entire cities beneath the Turkish countryside, or royal treasures hidden away in some mountain cave? Archaeological work continues across the former Hittite lands, and each year brings new findings that help complete our picture of this remarkable people. If you enjoyed this exploration of the Hittite Empire, please hit that like button, share this video with fellow history enthusiasts, and subscribe to Legacy of Empires for more incredible journeys through antiquity. From the mysterious Minoans to the mighty Assyrians, from ancient China to pre-Columbian America, we're dedicated to bringing the past to life. Thank you for joining me on this adventure through time. Until our next historical journey, remember that the past is never truly lost. It's just waiting to be rediscovered.